Thanks for joining me here today, and welcome back to webcast number 17 together. We're going to be talking about something that I think any sports bettor knows well, that is losing. Specifically, how to learn from your losing and to make yourself a stronger sports bettor from the experience. Learning to lose is a topic you hear a lot from high-level sports bettors when they're asked what is the biggest thing they needed to learn to advance their career as a sports bettor. And I absolutely agree with it. Learning to lose is paramount to becoming a successful sports bettor. Now, before we get into today's topic, I just want to point out that the comments section of this video is where we'll discuss any Q&A regarding this topic or sports betting in general, for that matter. It worked well last week and will continue it this week. Also, I want to remind you that if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up down below. This helps YouTube identify it as quality content and encourages them to promote it. Also, if you like this video and other sports betting content, please subscribe to this channel. This personally encourages me to create more content when I see people willing to subscribe. And thank you to everyone who has already subscribed. About half my viewers don't bother subscribing, which is a little bit disheartening, but I hope to win you over in time. So let's get started. Now, what prompted me to create this webcast using this topic is something that I've had hanging on the wall ever since my days in college. And that is this quote by Samuel Beckett. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. As a sports bettor, the one thing you're guaranteed to experience in life is failing. Even the world's greatest sports bettors fail more than 4 times out of 10, and we've discussed this before. You can't expect to always be winning, and you have to be realistic that a 54 to 55% win rate is quite solid over time. But that also means that 45% of the time you're losing. I'm a firm believer that there's no such thing as a mistake that's bad if you can learn from it. And that absolutely applies to sports betting. If you can learn from losses and learn from the mistakes, you are in that moment generating future EV, expected value. Furthermore, if you can eliminate or curtail any compulsive behavior or compulsive reactions to your losses, you are eliminating negative EV, which is also, in that moment, generating future EV. I'll admit to you, this quote, especially the last 2 words, is almost like a mantra to me. When I have a losing day or I take a tough loss, I often just sit here and say, fail better, until it sinks in. Fail better, learn to lose. It's really key to being successful in this business. So let's talk about 5 ways you can fail better. In other words, 5 ways you can learn from a loss. So the first one is the obvious one, and that's the one we've talked about before, and that is don't chase. We talked about this way back in webcast number 2, and I did that one, I believe it was called 5 Ways to Trim the House Edge. The advice still remains the same. In fact, this is the same slide picture that I used then. Don't chase your losses. Now, don't feel the need to get back to even or to make more wagers just because you find yourself in a financial hole, even a temporary financial hole. For every dollar that you don't bet into a negative EV situation, you are saving that much EV. Chasing losses doesn't always mean undisciplined sports betting either. There's a reason why they put the sports books in the back of the casino. They want you to have to walk through the casino to get in and get out of the sports book and be tempted every step of the way. Those of you who play online in jurisdictions such as New Jersey or Pennsylvania know that you often received offers to check out the sports book's corresponding online casino. They want to hook you in there, trust me. They're smart to share a wallet with that online casino as well, because you can get done with your day of sports betting and you look at your balance and you go, oh, I'm just a little bit from even. A couple hands of blackjack will get me back to where I started the day at. It's a slippery slope, and trust me, we've all done it. I've done it more times than I want to admit. I'm telling you, a big part of the battle of being a successful sports bettor is to keep your discipline so that you're always playing in positive EV situations. And here's what makes chasing losses so damaging. We have a tendency to want to increase variance when chasing losses. Now, you might do that by betting a long shot, maybe a 6-to-1 underdog or something like that, or you might do that by creating a parlay. And what you're most likely doing when you're doing that is you're over betting your bankroll because you're not risking 1/6 of your normal stake in that 6-to-1 bet. You're usually risking close to a full unit because the whole point of this larger bet, longer odds bet, is to make back multiple units if you do win. And as we've discussed before, if you bet into a parlay, you are merely compounding the house edge against you. The more legs of a parlay, the more the house edge compounds bet on top of bet. And that's what makes chasing with a parlay or a long shot so deadly to bettors. And then if you chase that win with an even, or if you chase that loss with an even bigger parlay, you are in tailspin territory at that point. You're wrecking untold amounts of hard work, and heaven help you if you win one of those big long shot bets, because that makes your brain think that you did it. You came out ahead. You did the right thing, even though in your heart of hearts you realize you didn't. You just got lucky. But that's a tough cycle to break. So as I mentioned way back in the webcast 2, one of the books that got me out of this chasing mindset was a book on poker, actually. The Elements of Poker by Tommy Angelo. He talks about your A, B, and C games and how to focus on always playing your A game. It's a good book. I'm going to put a link to it in the notes for this episode. So now the next way that you can fail better adds on to this last point, and that is to don't define time. Now, did you ever notice that local bookies usually settle up once a week, and they typically do that on a Monday, and that comes at the end of a weekend that typically has plenty of betting action. They call that Sunday night football game the chase game, right? For a lot of bettors, the idea of chasing losses comes about because they feel there is some sort of finish line here. That settle-up point with their bookie becomes their finish line, and they need to be ahead to avoid paying too much. It's been the demise of many bettors. But that whole finish line is completely arbitrary. Here's what you need to recognize to fail better. You are not defined by any amount of time, whether that is one game, one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. There's no finish line in the pursuit of being a sharp sports bettor. It's a process, and you need to TTP. Joel Embiid will let you know that means trust the process. Seriously, though, you don't need to think that a green number for a date equals an A on your report card, and nor does a red number on a date indicate that you failed. We're going to talk more about learning from your records shortly, but the point is, don't obsess over daily, weekly, monthly, or even in some cases, yearly win-loss numbers. You need to only be concerned with statistical information that is significant, and a significant sample size, in most cases, you'll never achieve in just a day of betting. It's just not going to be significant enough to concern yourself with. Psychologically, I think it's absolutely healthy to have a solid losing day once in a while. I'm talking like a 2-8 day, or one of those football Sundays where everything just goes wrong. We've all had them. Because it's far easier to stomach the small loss days where you go 4-5 or 6-6. If you get reminded every now and then that a big loss day does sometimes happen. You shouldn't be carried away by a day where you go 8-0 either. And most of us know that. So you need to temper the effect of the losses just as much as you would temper the effect of a big win. Also, if you find yourself that losing is a trigger that triggers this poor behavior, consider carving out time in your day where you focus on something completely unrelated to sports betting. I think finding balance is necessary in whatever you do, but getting a loss off of your mind can sometimes be very important. So consider making your carve-out time to be during a time where you might dwell on a loss or even think too highly of a win. Now, if you've got the ability in your Excel and Google Sheets skill set, try to track moving average of results. In the past, I've used an overall 50-day moving average. Why 50? Well, because that's what I saw in my brokerage account. I've also attempted to do moving averages just based on the last 50 bets, and typically maybe just the last 50 bets in a certain sport. This can really help smooth out the outliers like big losses and big wins, and you can also sometimes identify when you're starting to lose your edge mid-season. Although I do caution against reading too much into the tea leaves, the goal of using a moving average of results is just to smooth out the results over time so you can look at them in a less arbitrary segment. Now, both of these points so far have been somewhat psychological responses to losing. What about practical and tangible ways to fail better? Well, one of the best ways is to learn from losses, is to keep records. Now, record keeping is a drag, and honestly, some of the things that I'm about to tell you to keep track of may seem a bit of overkill, but you can learn so much from keeping your own records. Now, to those of you who have played online poker in the last 10 to 15 years, you know how beneficial tracking software has become. Poker Tracker, Hold'em Manager, they revolutionized the game of online poker, and they probably also made it much harder to win at. They harvested your hand histories as you played and could tell you hundreds of different stats and metrics about your play. You could quickly identify your weaknesses, whether you're putting money into the pot pre-flop too frequently, or maybe taking your cards to showdown too often. But they could really show you many different metrics about your play. They also allowed you to track the other players you played against as well. Quite remarkable software, and maybe someday someone will step up and provide the same level of software for sports bettors. I think it could be very revolutionary, but that's a topic for another day. Because I think a lot of bettors have blind spots when that they don't see because they don't keep strong enough records. Now, I have in my notes a plan to do a video or maybe even a couple videos about making tracking sheets. So this may be a concept we explore in depth another time. However, when it comes to learning from losses, what you need to do is have data to learn from. Now, ideally, you want to first track the closing line. If you're not beating the closing line on average, you're either betting too late or the market disagrees with your assessment. Now, as I've mentioned before, the world's best sports bettor is the market. And if it's against you consistently, well, you've got some issues because people smarter than you are against you. Beyond closing line value, you want to track the break-even probability. This can be done by converting the closing line to a probability. But for a money line type wager, this is a simple conversion. But for a point spread or a total, it's a little bit more complex. You'll need to know what the value of each half point is worth for each sport. However, the point of this exercise is not so much to track your performance against a -110, where the break-even probability is the known 52.4%. But it's sometimes harder to know where you stand when you're betting into money lines where you might have been betting against varied U.S. odds, maybe a plus 340 and then a plus 220 and then maybe a minus 135. So you want to be able to track if your winning percentage is profitable against that total aggregate average line rather than just against like a minus 110 where you know it needs to be 52.4%. You also want to track the metric you use to make your wager. Suppose you're a quantitative modeler and you're projecting strokes gained in golf in order to as the basis of your model. You should absolutely be tracking the actual strokes gained result for the bets you make and how close you come to your actual projections. Now, since you'll be updating your model anyway, this is useful work that you should already be doing. It wouldn't hurt to track your projection even for bets that you don't make and see how they fared as well. Obviously, this goes beyond the scope of most tracking spreadsheets that people use, but something that I do is I have my analysis programs print out basically a one-page summary of all the various projections for that day for that sport. And for ones that might just miss my betting criteria, I'll often make a little side note on the printed sheet and circle back to it and see how it performed later. Sometimes I don't get around to this for several days or even weeks, but it's often a good thing to look at when dealing with some losses. This way I can find times when maybe I should think about expanding the criteria and parameters of my model, or sometimes when I look at it and go, oh, okay, I dodged some losses by having that fall out of my range of playable numbers. In fact, when I was making this video, I came across this sheet that I had from Major League Baseball last year. I projected some lineups and projected some metrics related to the players in the lineup, and had used that for some betting. But then I also made some notes on this paper as to where I just missed making a bet and how it would perform. And on this sheet from this looked like it was June of 2019, I would have gone 1 and 2 in missing in these missed wagers. So it was good that they were left out of the mix. But I have a book of wagers like that I can go back and check out at any time. So now this is one psychological side effect for keeping records, and that is it's a distraction. When I'm mired in a losing streak, I tend to retreat into the numbers. The more I surround myself with these numbers, the more I tend to think less humanly and more robotically. Maybe it's just me, but taking the human element out of a lot of the work that I do in sports betting often yields better results. Building on this tangible record keeping, though, is the next point, and that is to assess losses honestly. And those are 3 words there that are key to this phrase. The concept is to find why you lost and why you failed, and be very honest in reporting back to yourself what you find. So now we're going to assume that you have conquered some of the psychological barriers about losing. You've avoided chasing your losses, you're not terribly concerned with short-term results, and now that you have these numbers at your fingertips, you're going to assess your loss. This is a narrative, and as a result, it can sometimes be left to interpretation. And hey, as humans, we often have a hard time seeing exactly why we failed. But you need to identify why you lost. I don't expect you to write down a report of every game you ever lose and how and why it happened. However, for some of you that are less certain of your handicapping prowess, this isn't an unheard of task and can sometimes be beneficial. One issue a lot of people have when they get into serious sports betting is they feel helpless because they don't know for certain that they have an edge. It's not like card counting at blackjack where your edge is absolutely quantifiable. I get how this can be frustrating for a lot of people. However, when you look into your losses and you find why you lost, it can often bring about confidence that you're on the right track, that the edge you think you have is indeed there. Now, the more compartmentalized your wager is, the easier it will be to do a post-mortem analysis on it. For instance, if you're a prop bettor and you're betting on pitcher strikeouts in a game, you can probably quickly identify why the prop lost. Your pitcher didn't face the number of batters you had projected, or the swinging strike rate of the opposing team was much lower than projected, so on. Doing this for 5 or 6 wagers a night in each sport might be a bit much to tackle. However, if you have a sport like football where you have typically time off between game days, you can absolutely find ways to verify where your bets went wrong. You can watch condensed games online with the NFL. You can pore over box scores and analysis. But here's the thing. If you're making your own narrative as to why a bet lost, you have to be honest as you possibly can with yourself. What you're looking for here is whether you had true negative variance happening, or if you had a false positive projection happening. Now, let's say you're a NASCAR bettor, for instance, and your projections were based on a race going in a certain manner. Maybe you theorized that it would be hard to pass given this track layout, so starting position was key. Now, when you watch the race or you check out the replay, you better be able to quantify whether or not your angle held up. If your driver crashes in the first 10 laps, well, you just had bad variance. That was bad luck. However, if his opponent in the heads-up match that you wagered on is able to easily make his way to the front of the pack, and then maybe if he loses the lead, he can work his way back up in the pack, well then passing at this track that you were relying on is possibly not as strong an angle as you thought it was. Now, I'm not saying you need to make wholesale changes just after this one result, but either make mental notes or even better, make physical notes so that in the future you can kind of be cognizant of this for the next time you wager. In a long-term sense, you need to be able to assess why you lost over a larger sample of wagers. This analysis generally happens at the end of a season, and this is why it often is best to keep all of those metrics over the course of a season, because now you have a large sample of metrics that you compare to. For instance, maybe you had an NBA season that didn't go as planned. Well, you have this large swath of metrics that you've been tracking all season long, and now you can go back and dive in and see if possibly you were wrong in how you were making your projections. You can use that to draw a more quantitative picture of your results. Now, the hard truth is the market tends towards efficiency. Every market does. The angle you use to beat the NBA the last couple of years will one day dry up. You'll notice that in your closing line value. You'll notice that with the break-even point. You'll notice that in how your metrics performed independent of the results. And you'll notice that in your actual results. Trust me, holding on to an angle beyond its usable lifespan is too easy to do. You think the profits will just magically come back, but they don't. And that leads to the final way that we can fail better and learn from our losses, and that is to get motivated. So I don't know about you, but nothing motivates me more than a loss. True story, when I started posting, I discovered that YouTube has a rich analytics interface that tracks everything about your video's performance. Suddenly I became obsessed with making my analytics look better and better. If I had a day where my views dropped or my audience retention went down, I started to work on another video that hopefully would be my best video yet. In many ways, making these videos has got me through the pandemic. There were times when I was in kind of a bad headspace with everything going on in the world, but then I'd get into YouTube and I'd become consumed with this video making and get motivated by this, and it would keep my mind off the state of the world. I hope I don't lose this motivation driver anytime soon. But what you need to do is you need to harness your emotions into motivation to do better. That can manifest itself in a number of ways. You can be motivated to tweak your model, improve your processes. You can be motivated to consider more angles when handicapping. You can be motivated to find another angle in this same sport. Now remember, every sport has multiple ways to bet into it, and you can always find a different derivative. So if you can find something that doesn't directly correlate with what you're already wagering on, you lower your covariance in your betting, and as a result, you lower your overall variance. And that's a good thing. Or you could be motivated to just get up earlier in the day so that you can get the news and information sooner. You could be motivated to shop more lines or find more outs to get even better pricing. Whatever it is, get motivated to do some sort of action. And then my advice is to also track this motivation. I've mentioned before that I keep a betting journal where I write down ideas and different notes about different bets. And this current one that I have is actually, it's turned into a little bit of a video ideas journal during the pandemic. But typically what I do is I put the date at the top of the page whenever I'm making notes. And I found that sometimes I'll put in just a little bit of a motivation goal, or like, get up earlier, that sort of thing, just a little note to myself. And that's effective because I'll look back through this journal and these little motivation notes to myself will stick out at the top of the page, and I'll think back and go, oh yeah, I got to remember to do that. So you can clearly make note of your motivation when coming off of a loss, and you can also make note of motivations when you're coming off of a win too. But it's a good way to bottle this energy and then be reminded of it when you're looking to manifest it. So let's recap what we went over today. We talked about failing better in that we are not chasing losses, and we are failing better in that we're not defining ourselves by small amounts of time. This race has no finish line. We're just moving ahead in our pursuit of being a sharp sports bettor. And then we talked about keeping records in order to be able to have kind of historical look back at what we're doing and maybe spot some flaws in our performance. And then we talked about assessing those losses honestly and being honest with ourselves in what caused those losses and which ones were variants and which ones were flawed processes. And then, of course, we talked about using those losses and all of the other points that we went over today to be motivated, to get motivated, to be a better sports bettor. And I think that's the biggest key in this entire video is to take that and use that as kind of your way of spurring you forward. And I think that's very, very important. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use the comment section of this video to discuss today's topic, so feel free to make a comment below. I'll reply back. And if you have a way of failing better that I didn't mention that you'd like to share, I'm sure other people would like to hear it. Or if you think that this video was hogwash, well, go ahead and tell me that too. But overall, thank you for attending today. Next week, we're going to be talking specifically about a sport. So far, all of our videos together, we've talked about kind of the theory of sports betting and general, theory of how things are done and the mindset of sports bettors and things like that. But next week, we're going to get some real sports returning, and I'm going to do a video on betting baseball. So I'm still working on that video, but it's going to be basically the different ways you can bet baseball, what to look at when betting baseball. I think there's a lot of you that see this is only going to be a 60-game season. You might say, I'm so desperate for some sports. I didn't used to bet baseball. It was kind of a grind all summer long. But now that it's going to be a shortened season and a sprint to the finish, I might go ahead and give baseball a shot. So if you're considering betting baseball this year, or if you want to just kind of brush up on what your baseball betting skills are and what's out there, we're going to do an overview video next week as the webcast, and I hope you'll join me for that. For now, I'm going to leave you with our quote from today, and I thank you for attending. Don't forget to leave a comment down below, give this video a thumbs up, and consider subscribing if you don't already. I will see you next week.